If you're anything like me, I'm sure there have been plenty of times when you're performing some data entry task and you find that there is some piece that you just don't know. You think to yourself, I'll put in the parts that I know now and come back and fill in the rest later. Only you get busy and move on to other tasks and completely forget to fill in the blanks. Unfortunately, this happens all too often to lots of people. We've already seen that incorrect or mistyped data is problematic for the database. Almost as troublesome to the integrity of the system is the case of missing or incorrectly entered data. Needless to say, when important pieces of your data structure go missing, your database will probably return incorrect or misleading information. Gone undetected, you might find that important business decisions are being made off of this erroneous information, and that's never going to be a good thing. Here's a look again at our invoices table. We'll want to go through it column by column and see if indeed each piece is a required component of the invoice. The invoice number is set up to automatically number each invoice, so the DBMS takes care of that for us when each order is placed. By definition, the invoice number will be required, but it's not something we need to provide. The customer name will be needed to know who ordered the product. The product ordered and quantity will also definitely need to be known in order to ship the correct number of items. So far, all of these pieces are necessary to create a valid invoice. If any one piece goes missing, then we're going to have an unhappy customer on our hands. Important attributes can be marked required in the DBMS. In Microsoft Access, this is as simple as toggling a property when you create the column in the table. In MySQL or SQL Server, you'll specify the field must be not null. Not null being database lingo for something that cannot be left empty. The various DBMSs tackle the restriction in different ways, but remember, in the initial requirement gathering phase, we're not even supposed to be concerned with how to implement the design. We're simply outlining what rules will need to be put into place. Now, the trap here is that you might think that you should just mark everything as required. This is a slippery argument. Have you ever filled out an online form or a survey where everything, even the most insignificant question or things that weren't even relevant, were required? You keep getting a pop-up window saying a comment is required or your middle name is required. It's pretty annoying, right? We want to make sure that we're not aggravating our end users while still gathering the pieces of information that are truly important. So we need to think carefully before we just blindly mark everything as a required value. Let's take a look at some additional payment details that might be collected on our invoices. Here I have a simple list of the fields that we might want to keep track of as part of our invoicing system, in addition to the customer name, product, and quantity that we saw earlier. Thinking through our business needs, I'll note that the billing address fields will need to be required, but the apartment number is not required since that won't apply to all of our customers. The credit card number is certainly required in order to process the payment, but a coupon code is not required. Those are easy examples, but what about the shipping address fields? At first glance, you might think that absolutely we need to know where to ship the product. But what if the customer checked the box that says shipping address is the same as billing address on the checkout page of the website? Then it would be perfectly acceptable to not supply a separate shipping address. That said, our database had better be designed well enough to know to fetch the correct address for the label. So you can see how running through a variety of scenarios can be helpful in determining your specific use requirements. There might be some very legitimate reasons why a particular field should or should not be marked required. But the point here is that we want to be conscious about what those reasons are. We'll do this in the requirements gathering phase while discussing the particular business rules that should be applied to the data structure. One last thought experiment on this invoice table. On the quantities field, we can go a step further than just marking it as required piece of information. We can establish a business rule that the value must be a number and that it must be above 0 so that someone can't accidentally enter in a negative value or a letter. You'd be surprised at how many different ways data can get entered incorrectly. A properly designed database protects you and your end users from all kinds of mistakes, as long as you've developed the insight into the requirements and implemented them through the database development lifecycle.